So I think we'll start. So good morning, everyone. So I'm Liam Mullins from the Seven Stars, and on behalf of Media for All, I'd like to welcome you all to the very first MEFA Matters. Now, Media for All was founded in 2018 by Naran Patel, and it's made up of BAME role models in the advertising industry. Our focus really is about how we can recruit, retain, and help BAME individuals to rise within advertising. So we all know the last 2 weeks have been really super difficult, right? We know that around the world and here in the UK, it's been tough. And the tragic death of George Floyd has sparked loads of protests. I don't know about anybody else, but the scenes from the UK this weekend were heartbreaking, just to see, the disgusting anti-BLM protesters by some of those, marginal far-right groups, really shocking. And we also know in the last couple of weeks, we've had lots of questions asked of ourselves about racism at work and specifically within the advertising sector. So we think that's really shone a light on, the racial inequality that definitely exists and the role that we believe everybody needs to play in how we tackle and how we really start to make things better. And it also made us as MEFA question, how much are we doing? How vocal have we been? How can we do more? And we think we really need to have a louder voice in making sure that we are really playing our part in helping the advertising industry become more inclusive and that we're challenging the inherent racism that exists. And really and truthfully, that's how this webinar was born. We think that, what we can really help is conversations and education and bring that to the table. And, we know that even myself as a mixed race person, sometimes you don't know the right thing to say, or you get things wrong, or you don't quite know the right way to frame stuff. So what we really wanted to help is create a platform where we can start to ask those awkward, difficult questions and really engage and have an inclusive panel talk about some of their experience and some of their thoughts about it. So each week we're going to mix the host up, the panelists up, but this week I'm really super lucky to kick us off, and we've got some brilliant MEFA role models and panelists joining us today. So I'm just going to introduce those guys. We've got Soups. So Soups is the commercial director at Forward PMX, and she also dedicates lots of her time to helping academies as a trustee. Alvin might be joining us. I think he's just trying to get in. Colette runs a brand and strategy consultancy called Brand by Me. Hi, Colette. We know Colette's doing a lot in that space. We've got Joey. Joey heads up the events business over at Global Media. And we've got my friend Dino Myers-Lamptey. And Dino is the founder of the agency, The Barbershop. So look, as we're going through, if you've got questions that you want to ask, you can either ask them, as yourself, or you can basically ask them anonymously. That's the word I was looking for. If you could pop them in the Q&A box, I'm going to do my best to moderate those. And if it makes sense to ask them at a specific time through the next half an hour, I'll jump in. Otherwise, we'll come back to them at the end. We might even use them as some thought starters for next week's session. So today's got quite a big question, which is, we worked on all the questions we've had in over last week. And really, at the heart of it is, what is the right way that we should be responding to Black Lives Matter? What's the right way that we should be responding to it as individuals, as brands, employees, but also as people who run businesses? And what I've noticed is a lot of help and advice, a lot of suggestions out there. Sometimes they conflate one another. Sometimes they're saying similar things, but not quite the same. And we kind of wanted to get to the heart of that question. What's the right way to respond? And I actually wanted to start off this session today by asking our panelists here what they think the right way and what their big one thing that people should be doing right now is. And Soups, I'm going to start with you. What would be your big bit of advice, or what's the one thing you've seen done in your own organisation or people that's made a difference?
Thanks, Liam, and hello everyone. So I think it's a big question at the moment, is how do you respond to BLM? And truthfully, I don't think there is a right way. I think there have been many wrong ways to do it. And we've been struggling with that ourselves as a business. We're a global business. We've got many people in the US as well as EMEA who are struggling with what's happening around the world. One of the things that we did do is to hold a safe space forum for all of those that wanted to share their experiences, understand a little bit more, and hear from their colleagues. And that safe space forum, for those that did take it up, I believe was helpful in them trying to get their voices out there, because I think that's the biggest struggle at the moment is that people are not being heard. So we found that to be really useful, and it's something that is helping us in looking at our policies for equality and kind of anti-racism, and understanding what it is we've missed within the business, and what it is that we need to fix.
Thanks, Soups. I think, some of these things that they don't take a huge amount of time, you can just set them up and it's an easy thing to do. So I think that's a really good one. Dino, as well as creating brilliant backgrounds, what would your one great thing you've heard in the last couple of weeks that can make an instant impact? What would that be?
Yeah, well, firstly, actually, it's funny you mentioned the background because this was actually created by a client. My Karma Drinks client actually created this background off the back of a talk that we did last week. So that was a brilliantly communicated thing by a business, which was really just to reach out there and make the conversation very public, hit it head on. And I think that's the first thing. The first thing is that if your value's in the right place, then they guide you as to how you should be reacting to this. And sometimes that is just coming out and saying, let's talk about this. I haven't got all the answers. But the biggest thing I would say right now is if you are a leader, if you're a CEO, write something down and communicate it. You might seek advice, but I think the biggest mistake some people have made have turned to other people to write that thing down for them. Nothing's going to work unless the leadership and the CEO is behind it. And you've got a responsibility to your staff to just, tell them how you feel about it and how you expect the company to feel about it. And that should involve, all the things that Supriya mentioned in terms of listening and hearing and changing policies, but it should also be a very empathetic response to a very tragic thing.
Yeah. I think that's great. And, values and standing for it's got to be so much more than just words on a wall, right? And so if you've got a good set of values, they should definitely help direct you and make sure your response is authentic and right. And Colette, I guess in your business, that is an area where you spend a lot of your time talking to clients about without changing the question, which is what I was about to do halfway through, what would your big bit of advice be? And what would your suggestion be to the group?
Yeah, I think I think both what Soups and Dino said in terms of listening, but also acting with empathy and really having, and I think as leaders, it's also important that people do seek to educate themselves. So really look up and read some stuff around anti-racism resources, because with the best one in the world, we don't know everything. No one knows everything. And there's a fundamentally different conversation happening. So it's very easy to do very tone deaf response at this time just by not listening. Or for example, I heard a couple of things. One organization where, and to Dino's point as well, not fobbing this off on other employees, especially not on your Black employees. Please don't do that. Asking them to front up the whole response for the organization is just not appropriate. But in terms of one thing I would do, listening and responding with empathy. I think the big sort of, people have called them various things, but like town hall meetings, where leadership are very present in them, present and listening, I think that sends a big signal. And then scheduling in time, once you've had those big kind of listening exercises, once you've really absorbed that, to go back to the organization and say, this is what we're going to do. Even if you don't have the answer, it's not about staying silent until we have everything worked out. That's just not appropriate. So I think really importantly, a massive listening exercise, being very present and clear so people can see visibly that you're part of these things, and then setting up a time where you are going to respond, even if that response, a timely sort of response, even if that means we don't still have all the answers to this from EST. And I guess the other thing of it is making sure that you do respond with action, and you do respond with some action. And you know what? People saying we don't know what to do. We've seen so many top 10 lists. Here's what organizations need to do. You can't use that as an out anymore. You can't use that as an out. There are loads of things you can do. People have done the work for you. So just do those things and say we're doing them in a timely fashion.
Yeah. No, Colette, that's great. And there is definitely stuff out there. And if you haven't responded yet, I mean, wow, where have you been? But equally, there is stuff and advice you can do. So, you have to act. That's really imperative. Joey, Global's, massive organisation, radio, outdoor, events business, what you run. Tell us about what Global have been doing in this space.
So I think just to echo what the rest of the panelists have said, I think it's all about really opening up the dialogue for the conversation, and that really needs to be opened up at senior level, which is exactly what has been happening at Global. And then I think at the same time, it's also opening up that dialogue on a local level. So teams that are in specific teams get together with your managers and actually have that safe space to kind of talk that out, even in a team level. Because then when it gets done as a leadership level, it's really easy to kind of then bring up the key things. You'll start to find patterns. of issues within the organisation that needs to be addressed. And I have to completely echo Colette when I say, you know, that then needs to be followed up with what I would just call long-term sustainable action. You know, what is your statement of intent? What are the objectives of that organisation? How are you then going to follow that through? So in terms of, you know, what should people be doing, I think it's from leadership level down, making that statement, but also supporting your employees, because for a lot of employees, this has been quite a difficult and stressful time. So taking into account their mental health while you're putting these processes into place. But the main big thing I would say for me is you need to start having the conversation, and don't be afraid to have it.
Thanks, Joey. I think you're absolutely right. Soups, just touching on some what Joey said, and I guess you kicked us off with that whole safe space initiative. But just could you tell us a bit more? We've had some questions coming through about, well, how do they work? How do you set them up? How do you make sure that they're action oriented? And you know, how do you make the most of those sessions?
Sure. So I think I should start off by saying why we thought a safe space would be really important. As I think is the case with most agencies, representation within our business is not as diverse as we would want it to be. And bearing that in mind, we were clear that we needed to enable individuals within our business from all backgrounds to be able to share their opinions and their voice. So we started off by actually calling it a working group, and then very quickly realized that this wasn't something that we wanted people to work on. We wanted them to share their opinions so that we as a leadership team could work on it. It wasn't anonymous. You know, everybody knows each other within the business, and we wanted people to be able to share their thoughts. It was online because obviously during COVID times, everything seems to be through Teams or through Zoom. But there were some ground rules that were set, and those ground rules were set out from the very beginning, ensuring that people were abiding by, you know, the rules of listening, so and rules of engagement, in allowing people to have their opinion, not to react to those opinions. You know, we weren't there to answer questions, we were there to listen. We weren't there to justify our actions, we were there to listen. And we weren't there to kind of give any sort of kind of follow-up really, because we were there to listen. So, and it allowed the participants, whoever wanted to join in, I think that's really key, is, you know, that no matter how many people you have joining in, not everyone wants to talk. Some people just want to listen, want to understand what the vibe is, and may then come and talk later. So we are setting up initiatives off the back of this to allow people to come and talk to you privately. And we're looking at a number of different levels as well, so that everyone is comfortable with who they're talking to. It is quite daunting to go and speak to a senior member of staff, as opposed to a peer. So we're taking all that feedback back. But I think the key thing is for those safe space forums it is for listening, and not for reacting and not for responding. That's for later.
Thanks, Soaps. And Joey, in terms of how, you know, that initiative's been working at Global, is that the same with you? Is it we're talking now, we're listening to what people have got to say? Is that how you've been setting those up as well?
Yeah, so it got done in a company-wide forum at first, where they almost set up a Teams call and said, this is a safe space. You know, this is just, you know, when the original George Floyd incident happened, you know, they were quite reactive in doing that, which is great. But I think it's about the regularity of those consistent conversations is the key bit. And, you know, I know that there's a lot of individual teams that are doing this on a regular basis, because it's not just about addressing the issue, it's also educating everybody within your teams about the issue at the same time. So for us, that's, you know, I talk with my team quite regularly about it, and they always ask me questions, because there are going to be some things they don't know. There'll be things that I'm feeling that they may not feel, and I think it's all about having those spaces to have those conversations. So, you know, back to what Soup said, even if you're doing it in small town group settings, it's making sure that it's safe enough to do that, which is exactly the aspect that we are taking to do that.
Cool, thanks, Joey. I think we might have had just Alvin join us as well. Hi, Alvin, how are you?
I'm not bad. Sorry for being so late. I'm outside, which is very weird. I'm outside of prep, which, you know, a few months ago, big whoop. Now it feels very transformative. So now I'm good. I'm very good. Sorry for being so late. I'm very well. Enjoying the sun.
Thank you. We're going to go now to Colette. who has a question. We might have to mute Alvin as well, I think, but we're just going to go to Colette. We've had a good question through Colette, and it's also been shared with us before, and some of the things that people have asked us is, you know, if Black and, you know, BAME people are being asked and being lent on really heavily by senior management to help guide the response and action plans, what do we think about that, and how should they respond? And, you know, if we come from a place where it's everyone's responsibility, surely that focus shouldn't just be on that group of people to help guide that response.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. I think there's a couple of things. A couple of weeks ago, I thought it was highly inappropriate because, as we said, this is a triggering and hugely traumatic time. I think there's something around, so I've seen it done well, and I think I can share this. So I did a workshop with Channel 4 last week, and Channel 4's BME network are called The Collective. And I think I spoke to the chair of The Collective about this and how she felt, because she has been quite heavily involved in the organisation response. And I think there are 3 things that they did really well, and then I can talk about what to do if your organisation's not doing this. The first one is they absolutely, first things first, checked in with people, how people are feeling about this, with no expectation or agenda on having to respond. The second thing they did, they sought permission and asked the chair and the collective how they would feel about being involved and how they wanted to be. And that's really important, that seeking permission. So it wasn't like, I heard one horrendous example where someone was just CC'd into an email being told they were doing this, you know, completely different thing. I think the third thing is then, and like both Joey and Soups have said, they convened a listening space, town hall space, where everybody was invited to share their views and listen. And there was a really strong push on allyship. So the collective now has a number of people that aren't BME that are now members because they want to be allies. So it's not just on the BME members of it to do that. And the third thing fundamentally is that once they'd asked how the collective want to input and how they wanted to be part of this, they then freed up space for the chair and other members to do that. So it wasn't on top of my busy day job, having to stay up till 11 o'clock at night to craft these things. Actually, they cleared space. So actually work was given within people's day jobs to other teams or other parts of the team because this was a priority. And I think that's exactly the way to do it. If you feel like, either as an individual employee or as a network, you are being unfairly put upon, I think it's a difficult conversation, but I think it's absolutely fine and right for you to say that this time is very traumatic and triggering for Black people and people of other ethnic minorities. It is bringing up for us our own experiences of racism, and therefore the weight of the work that you are asking us to do is not appropriate. You know, at this time, and you can give people an option, you know, come back to us in a couple of weeks. If you can free it up, if we can create something where it's a listening exercise with allies, any number of these things. But that, I guess, you don't have to have the solution. You can absolutely say the first thing. And you can say that if you don't feel comfortable going directly head on to your leadership, there's a reason why I don't work in the industry anymore. I run my own business now because I was that person. Go straight onto the leadership. I can't do this. I don't think that's necessarily the approach, but definitely use your line managers if you feel appropriate. You will also identify there are people who can be sort of allies within the senior leadership team. Use them. Say, actually, this has happened. I'm not sure how to deal with this. Would it be possible that you could talk to so-and-so? But you really have to speak out. It's massively important. You can't just absorb the load and just take it on. You can't. So you really need to find a way. Even coming to events like this or going to Media All and asking the question of mentors, find help and find somebody that can speak out if you feel like you're being unfairly overloaded. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, it does, Colette. And I think, you know, the view that our agency took a little bit as well is that you can't put the pressure just on one group of people to help find a solution. It's got to come from all of us, right? And we've got to make sure everyone's able to engage in that conversation, have a better understanding of the situation. And then I think, you know, the question I'm going to go to Dino next is, you know, things need to happen, things need to change now. So Dino, a question we've had that's just come through, let me just do a call out. It's from Michelle Camps. It's a really great question. It's like, the listening bit's perfect. It's definitely what we need to do. The dialogue's right, but we need change, and we need change now. How can, you know, and I've seen some things written about, you've got a lot of the industry signing letters and everything and going, well, actually, but what you actually tangibly doing to change that on your board with your senior team. And I know, you talked about before a couple of initiatives to really call that out across not just the advertising industry, all industries. What can we do to make people become more accountable for this situation?
Yeah, there's a number of things, but I think it's always worth just focusing on some of the simple, significant things that can make a remarkable difference. For me, we're at the awareness stage for a lot of people. The signing of a letter is acknowledgement, and even the communicating within your own agency or company, that is some form of acknowledgement and awareness of we have a problem. It's quite surprising that it takes such world events for it to become so apparent. But that's the stage that we're at. The next couple of stages, actually, which is represented by the fist in the background, actually, and the reason for the poster was about awareness, action, and accountability. And this question is very much about accountability. For me, we're in a talent-led business, and often people forget that. It's about people, and about people. And why this is such a big issue is because it's about human rights and justice, and your company is about people. So for me, the things that need to be done in terms of the actionable things are things that should have been done already, such as having the right equality policies in place, using the right methods to recruit people, stretching out, and going further, not having deliberately discriminatory policies in place like, unpaid internships and things like that. Even going so far as doing equality pay gap reports and being transparent about your actual numbers on the C-suite, diverse numbers on the C-suite. And you will not have the best numbers right now. If you're a company over a certain size, by fact, it's poorly represented at the wrong ends. But don't use the lack of a pipeline as an excuse. Take responsibility for it and show leadership in where you want to get to. Set out your targets. Say, look, here's where we're currently at, and here's where we think we should be. Overnight, you can solve some of the problems by either looking at non-exec directors or just trying harder, actually. And a lot of people just don't actually go as far as they should do. And I think that in terms of accountability, for me, there's a circle of accountability here, which is beyond agencies, but it's also clients, recruiters, intermediaries. Everyone's got a role to play in it by holding each other to account about the equality standard that we're setting. And actually, I think one of the benefits about the CEO letter, the open letter, is it's allowing people to speak up against their CEO, their companies who haven't necessarily achieved the things they're pledged to do. So for me, I see this as a very first early stage step of now judge us by what we've claimed in public we're going to do.
Yeah, I agree, Dino. Talk is absolutely critical, but you've got to take action. And I think the following weeks and months, we've got to hold all of those businesses to sign that to account and say, publish your numbers. Let's see your numbers, because I think that is going to be a telling thing. I'm going to go to Alvin. Alvin, we're conscious that you're outside, so hopefully the volume's cool. And Soups, I know that you've got a bit of an answer on that too, so I'll come to you if Alvin struggles here. But Alvin, one of the questions we've got, which I think is absolutely bang on from some anonymous, is our agency culture and industry really feels quite far behind some other industries in terms of so based on your experience, about our workplace culture that's kind of an exclusive.
It's quite a complicated, I guess, answer, but I think my thought for that, it's really easy for companies to stay in the status quo. And I think we all know this. In our industry, most of the senior people are going to be white and male. So of course, if you have it from the top down, then that's going to filter down, and that's going to be everything from the hiring policy to even who they decide to socialize with. So in the media industry as well, especially in media agencies where a lot of it is around close friendships, it's around who you get along with, or as I hate this question in the interview, will they fit in? Which is to be honest, up until fairly recently, I thought, will they fit in? That seems like a reasonable question, but actually it should be, will they add? And that's the real problem, I think. That's the reason why specifically this industry has had issues. I guess the other thing to bear in mind compared to other industries where they've actually made for a long time, for example, the auditing firms, the Big Four, they've been making real deliberate efforts for years to get more varied people from different backgrounds into their industry. And that's why, but media, that hasn't really happened. There hasn't been a strong force from the media industry. You haven't had, say, that's the issue. Who would do that? Would it be a group 10 or WPP, or would it be brands? Who does that? And that's an issue. Whereas, if you have a PwC at a graduate fair and you see people of colour there, you're going to think, brilliant, I know I can fit in there. So I think it's one of those things we do need to almost force change. You can't just, a lot of people say, well, if people are good, there's a talent there, they'll come. We've tried to find the talent. And to be honest, that's a reason, that's now an excuse. And that's what we need to stop reasons becoming excuses. I think that's the reality. Then there needs to be a concerted effort. And just what Dino said with the pledge, there is now, you've got individuals who have represented their company who have said, I will oblige to these things, and they need to back it up. In a year's time, I don't want to see companies go, well, we did say we're going to do this, we did say we're going to show our numbers, but X, Y, and Z. I guess the annoying thing is we can't just, and when I say we, I'm not just talking about people, I'm talking about everyone. Everyone has to do this now. We have to force it. You can't just sit back and wait. Change doesn't happen if we just sit on our ass, pardon my French. Change happens when we all group together and take action. And it's not easy. And I feel guilty sometimes because I'm sat at home, what am I doing? But I think we all have to be doing it. We all have to force it. Because now it's not the time to just say, well, it'll sort itself out. No, if things were left to sort itself out, there wouldn't be a civil rights movement. There wouldn't be suffrage. There wouldn't be a lot of things that we now take for granted. There wouldn't be gay marriage. There wouldn't be gay marriage if people didn't force the issue. So that's what we have to do. Sorry, I think I went a bit off topic there. But
no, Alvin,
I'm outside, I've got fresh air.
I've got the shivers on the back of my neck because you're absolutely right. No, you're absolutely right. We have to force change, and the worst thing that can happen is if in 4 weeks' time, 8 weeks' time, things come back to normal. People aren't on the street. That's not.
But also, Liam, sorry about it, but it makes business sense. By the way, this isn't just obviously from an ethical point of view. This makes sense. From a business sense, it makes sense. If you have more diverse people in your agency, then you know how to pitch advertising to those people.
Yeah.
Whether it's disability, whether it's BAME, whether it's LGBT, it makes business sense as well as ethical sense. So we should do it. Sorry to butt in.
No, cheers, Alvin. So I'm just going to come to you on this question, and we've just had an anonymous question linked to it, which is how do we force people to kind of disclose their numbers? How do we force action through, and what else can we do?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because there's also a piece about how do people identify and whether people want to identify themselves as well, because it's quite a delicate matter, and it's something that we're looking at ourselves. So we have started to talk about the numbers. I wouldn't say publish because it's not public and it's not I don't think we've got all of the numbers, but we have started to talk about them within our business because I think it was important for us to recognise our makeup. And I think I'll go back to what Alvin said is we are representing a very diverse community, and I'm talking about in the marketing industry, in the media industry. We are representing our clients to a diverse population, and if we don't have that diversity of thought, that diversity of people within our own businesses, how can we actually do that and do that well? So it's actually something that unfortunately we haven't looked at previously, but we should be. I think it's a bit like the gender pay gap piece. There are ways of forcing the matter and making people publish their numbers, and there's ways in which businesses can be open to it themselves and make a commitment to their people to publish those numbers. Now, we are in the process of writing our commitments to our business, and I think we need to also be really mindful of the environment that we're in. And I think what I've been really cognizant of recently, and I fell into marketing by chance, which I think a lot of people have. I was in insurance, no less, and then walked into marketing. And it's because I didn't know it was an industry that could have a career for me. And I think there are a lot of things holding us back from entering into the marketing and the media industry. It's not just the fact that there isn't representation. That's a big, massive piece here. And I've seen it in my own community where now, the youngsters are coming to me going, what do you do? I heard you've got a really cool job, and what is it? Whereas there was nobody in my day that I could go to and say, what is it that you do? I want to really learn about it. So I think there's a piece around education and actually letting our youngsters know that this is actually a career path. It's not just a job. It's a you know, a full-blown career that you can have here, and it is really respectable. Otherwise, you know, in my community, there's the 4 standard jobs that you should be going after if you are 18 years old and looking at university degrees. But most importantly, representation is what will help that happen more within our own communities. And I think, you know, I can't remember what the exact stats are, but most people of colour from the BAME community kind of drop out at that mid-level management position. And I'm not quite sure why that is. I don't know if tenure has something to do with it. I don't know if it's just that there's a glass ceiling that they can't break through. But that's the piece where if we can get more representation at senior levels, that word will spread not only within our own community, but also within their communities. And that will help the education piece. But of course, in order for that to happen, as a business and as a community, we need to be more diverse in our thoughts and more supportive and support people in those positions and champion them and sponsor them into those positions. Sorry, I think I've taken up quite a bit of time. But yeah, I think those are the key things for me.
I appreciate that, Soups. And I'm just going to call, we're not going to call time on this session because we're overwhelmed with the amount of messages and support we're getting from various different places. And we've still got 132 people on, which is fantastic. So we're all going to stay on until 12:45. If you have to go, thank you so much for joining us, being part of these conversations. It's going to be every Tuesday at midday. And we're going to be having the same open chat, which hopefully, you know, encourage your friends, encourage your bosses, encourage your HR teams if you happen to have them, get them involved, and let's make sure we're all having this debate and discussion. So thanks for those of you that have to leave us now, but for the rest, we're gonna stay and talk about some of these questions that are coming through. So with that, I'm going to go to Joey. And Joey, there's a bit of a question here, which I think is really interesting, which is, it's not quite linked to today's topic, but I think it's definitely one that we should discuss, which is, you know, companies quite visibly putting, you know, their social medias to black or being silent for the day, and very publicly doing stuff whilst not necessarily addressing internally and being vocal about what they're doing internally. Now, in my own organisation, we're not where we want to be yet, but we definitely want to put our hand up and support and show how we're together with a group of society that are being badly treated. But I totally get that question. What's your view on that? I don't know if you can speak on behalf of Global, but tell me a bit about your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you a bit about my thoughts on it, actually. I think it's something that we all think about in a lot of detail. And I think really what it boils down to is, you know, as you know, even Global as an organization, we're not there yet. There are loads of organizations out there that know they're not there yet. And, you know, making, you know, the black square on Blackout Tuesday is a great first step. And I call it a first step intentionally because, you know, this is a longer term process. I think the next step for them is how are they engaging with their employees? How are they engaging with their teams? What support mechanisms are they putting in place? How are they empowering people of color through, you know, middle management jobs into senior jobs? It's going to be down into the action. So for me, I look at it and think, okay, what is the statement of, as I said earlier, the statement of intent of that organization? You know, what are the 5 things they're going to do as part of their diversity and inclusion strategy to improve people of color within the workplace? Because, you know, I come back to what Soup said earlier about, you know, a lot of younger people who are maybe apprentices or trainees coming in through the media industry and not necessarily seeing people who look like them in senior roles and then thinking, you know what, I can't quite get there. So I think it's all about, yes, you can do it publicly, but if you're going to do it publicly, you've got to back it up internally and back it up in a big way. And, yeah, you know, I say that with a lot of emphasis because it's all well and good doing things in the public domain, but you have a lot of people that work with you internally. So therefore, how are you engaging those people and those key assets, as I like to call them, within your own companies to build up that strategy, to build up what diversity and inclusion looks like in your organizations, to be able to deliver something great in, you know, this year, next year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years time. That's how we should be thinking. I think a lot of people think, okay, Black Lives Matter, black square, 2 weeks, great, job done. No. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. What does that look like? And I think if we can strategize as companies and do 5 and 10 year strategies, we should be doing exactly the same thing with this. So those are my views.
No, absolutely. No business survives saying this is what we're going to do this financial year without knowing what's going to happen in the future. You've got to have that plan, how you're going to get there, and publish it.
Yeah.
Dino, I'm going to come to you in a second about quotas and how do we force, and how do we address the numbers. Colette, did you have a point you just wanted to come back on the top of what Joe was just saying there?
Yeah, I did. You saw me nodding so vigorously when I was thinking that my head nearly fell off. The thing I would say as well, and it links to actually what Super's brilliantly answered the previous question too, is I think there's also something about being really clear about calling out and having consequences for negative behaviours, because actually it can be a very hostile environment as a person of colour within an organisation, particularly if you're one of few. So things like giving people the opportunity to spot microaggressions, call them out, and there being consequences for managers who consistently show this behaviour. Because what you see is people bouncing it. The same leaders will be in place doing very bad behaviour, and people are just bouncing out of the organisation again and again and again. That's an issue for me if it goes unchecked. So there's something about there's something about making sure, in fact, the point goes on both internal and external behaviour. It's very demotivating when people are externally making big statements, and either internally the behaviour and is very negative and they're seeing negative behaviour go unchecked, or as a brand, they've actually in the past done very poor behaviours. So the example I would give internal and externally is the L'Oreal example, right? Oh, speaking up is really important, yet not for Monroe Bergdorf, who we fired. That sort of disconnect, so that's a really widely publicised one. That disconnect internally and externally, it's really important that bad behaviour is called out, addressed, and the people responsible are held accountable too, as well as creating all the stuff that people have said before, supportive environments.
Thanks, Colette. Dino, you wanted to just make a comment on the question about quotas and should we enforce them? How do we enforce them? What's the right way forward in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, I don't think quotas are necessary in an industry that's based upon people and talent. Really, I think it's unfortunately, it diverts from the main issue here, which is that there is enough talent out there. There are targets that we should have, and we should be judging ourselves by the targets that we have set ourselves to make things right. Quite simply, I think that people should be rewarded and performance kind of like evaluated based upon the targets that we've set ourselves for what this industry should look like at every different level of a company. So, I think that, when you recruit someone into this industry, they don't come, fully made for, the CEO position. It's about their attitude and about the opportunities that you give them, including developing them to become that person that can sit at that seat. And there's not enough investment in diverse people to help them rise through organizations at the moment. And they're falling off and not being retained within organizations. So I think that's a critical thing that people have to invest in and focus on to try and change the pool, change the numbers, change everything. And it takes investment. But I don't think the way of doing it is just by saying, we're going to, have a quota and then force someone into a position as such. I think you should have a target and a number. And you go, right, okay, this is what we're going to achieve by this date. And you're going to hold yourself publicly and transparently accountable for it. And actually, my view about talent in the industry has changed quite a lot from just trying to give talent the information so they can make the right choices about the kind of companies they want to work at or not. And that information is just the statistics that say how likely they are to rise to the top of that organization or not, based upon what those companies' numbers are.
Cheers, Dino. We've had a question for, and by the way, it sounds like I totally agree with what you said there. And we just need to be more vocal about it and demand it of the people who employ us, the people we go to work for, the people we work with. And as you say, it's not just people who work in industry X, it's your clients, it's their businesses, it's everyone. We just need to start holding each other to account more. And at the moment, while this is such a platform of conversation, we now have more weight behind us than ever before. So my view is we need to keep the momentum going. We need to be louder and louder. I've got a question that's come through, which is quite a tough one. And I guess it's one that's it might be our last question of the day actually, but it was just about a lot of people have different triggers. A lot of people don't necessarily have the confidence to answer or to demand out of their employers or to be vocal enough, and I totally get that. And I guess the question is about what are Media for All doing and what are MEFA doing around giving people more tools, giving people more of a framework to go and have a constructive conversation with their employers, with the people they work with. And I guess Colette, coming to you on that, I think it's a big question, and we asked ourselves that the day after the unfortunate killing. We were like, well, what have we done? What have we got? So what should we be doing as MEFA now?
So I think I'm not going to pat ourselves on the back. We are doing it, but we have come a long way in terms of our discussion. So I think there's about 3 things, right? There's probably about 55 things, but I'm going to say 3. The first one, and we're doing it, is calling out and speaking out to the industry. Love what Dina said about that circle of accountability. And we are in a unique position as MEFA where we have a number of people, whether it's in our networks or where we work, that we can hold people in that circle of accountability accountable for their actions, and we can amplify the voices of people that are doing that too. And I think that's really important. There was a really good example, a very small but good example of that with events organizers last week, where there's a whole instance of kind of all white panels, which is not good enough. We've been working to really call people out and change that and raise awareness of that. I think the second thing is we're really brilliant at, because we are a group of people of colour, BME people who all are quite senior and have been senior in careers. So we have a platform and respect within our own organisations, and many of us work within big organisations. Not me, I don't, my tiny agency, but we work within big organisations where we can have direct input. We are in a leadership position, and we're taking that responsibility seriously. Supes mentioned it in terms of taking our responsibility seriously as members of leadership teams and as sponsors too. So it's actively looking to bring people up. We are all mentors, and you can go on the website and sign up for a mentor straight away, and that advice and from people who have lived this is really valuable too. And I think you can look to mentors to help you navigate these tricky situations. Someone said, within organizations, people feel like they can't speak up, like they don't have a voice. We can be that voice. And if you share with us your lived experience, if you share with us your thoughts, we can seriously be that voice. People are connected to organizations that alongside us are driving change. There are a number of people within us that are connected with Creative Equals, for example. So actually by leveraging these kind of partnerships, that's how we as MEFA can support this. So we're not looking to duplicate looking to duplicate stuff that's already working well. We're looking to amplify, harness it, and make sure we are really boldly and critically speaking out, not, being afraid ourselves of what about our position. No, we can't be like that. And we are holding ourselves accountable for that as a group, as well as doing this to share best practice, stuff we've learned, stuff we know that works well. Some of the stuff, I've been writing notes the whole time, practical stuff that people from organizations have been sharing. I think, I would agree with, I'm sure that people would agree, it's been super useful. You don't know what's happening within your own organization. When you hear it from other people, that's super useful too. So these are all stuff that we can, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm holding us accountable, we can and we will all continue to do and build on.
Can I add one thing, sorry, Liam? So just quickly. Sorry, I just want everyone, a lot of people are asking for, advice and, and things like that. And actually, I think it does a disservice to give a bit of quick advice over, because ultimately these are complex problems that need to be solved in organizations that take time and they take money, right? And those two words need to, if you go back and talk to your organization, time and money, there are a lot of organizations that we can point you to, or individuals that are brilliant for transforming cultural change in your business and all the rest of it. And actually, when they get plugged into your business, they find out it's more complicated than it probably first looked, because you've got blockages here that you didn't even know existed. So actually, you need to kind of like gather your own data, pay for that kind of, expertise. And then you actually need to invest in the program to make the change happen with executive leadership support and all the rest of it. So it's not an easy, quick fix. So don't jump in board thinking it's some kind of easy, quick fix. But it is definitely cheaper than losing your diverse talent, which you will do if you don't sort it out.
Great, thank you, Dino. And I think that's a good point to bring today to a close. I think we purposely didn't want to do big hour-long sessions each week. The point is we might move it to 45 minutes based on how much great chat there's been. I think 30 minutes is a bit ambitious, but the point is every Tuesday, join us at midday and let's get into some of these topics and some of these debates and share what we can between us. There's been a couple of questions come through just about terminology and language. So is it okay to call someone black? Is BAME the right question or the right terminology? Is it BME? We're going to spend a bit more time next Tuesday talking about that and get into a bit more of the dynamics of language and what the right thing and what the wrong thing is to say. And the short answer to that right now is there is no wrong or right answer, but we're going to get into a bit more detail about it next Tuesday and have that chat. We've also had Elizabeth suggested we do a bit of a poll about the makeup, the ethnic makeup of today's attendees. And I think it's a really good shout because we're very conscious as MEFA that we want this to be a forum for everybody. So I think our view is that's how we start to affect change. And we're going to make sure that we broadcast this to as broad a group of people as possible. So please help us do that. Please send it to your HR team, ask them why they weren't on, or send it to your boss and say 45 minutes, get your sandwich and have a coffee. That's what this is about today. This is about a platform for change, making things different and making things happen. So I just want to say thank you to my fantastic panelists today. I hope we got to a lot of the questions that we asked. We will share with next week's invite some resources and places we can point you towards that people have talked about today. And all I can say is have a good week, and I'll see you next week. Cheers.
Cheers all.
Thanks, everyone.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.